Yeah, it does a lot. Yeah, it sheds water. It kind of keeps it more stable. It stops it from kind of swelling and contracting a little bit too. And it looks like night, like it's a shadow. I tripped over this thing so many times that you just cannot see it. And so, anyway, there's a time and a place for everything. There's a somewhere, I don't know where, there's a piece of ash where we did 3 different styles of yakisugi. And you can see the difference between the depth of the burn and the final oil treatment. And so depending if you want it to look invisible or you want it to be more like really like basalt, you can finish it differently. All right, all right. Snack break, or are we good? Okay, moving along. Now we have a big pile of lumber. Now what do we do about it? What's the difference between this board and that board? Is there a difference here between these two? They're both the same board footage. Are they worth the same amount of money? Do they have the same applications in the real world? No, they don't, do they? Sorry. All right, so let's look at that. This, just like log grading, is a complete science, and depending how fancy you want to get, you can get really fancy. And so you got to know your market and what you're selling. Or if you're buying, it's really nice to know that too, right? So there's a rule for every species, really conveniently. And if you're buying it at like a store, or if you're using this for like structural construction, it would have to have this thing called a grade stamp, which I'm sure you've all seen if you bought a 2x4 or a sheet of plywood. There'll be like a stamp on it that says something like milled by this place, this this finished treatment, kiln dried to 15%, and heat treated. And so we'll talk about this later. But so there's a standard. So you can look at, so a home inspector can come in, cut a hole in your sheetrock, look at the 2x4 studs, and if they don't see a stamp, you don't pass. So you need to make sure for structural stuff you're using grade stamp stuff. And you can hire inspectors and have it stamped, or you can become an inspector and stamp your own. So anywho, and then there's this really, really cool thing that's starting now that Rick's going to talk about later called the USRW, which is a lumber grading system for urban wood, because we're not growing 2x4s in a farm setting. We're growing shade trees that have aesthetic and ecological services for us. So that's a different game, and we create different wood. And so having that system coming out is really great for all of us in this room. So he'll talk about that later. So for the most part, though, most of us want to cut hardwoods. You know, oak, cherry, ash, hickory. You can go down that line for a long time. And so the National Hardwood Lumber Association created this standard for us. And this has been around for a long, long time. And it basically is designed for folks that are going to take that piece of lumber you cut and dried and turn it into stuff like cabinetry or furniture. And so what they need to make cabinetry and furniture fast, reproducible, and stable good end product is they need clean, straight wood. No knots, no twists to it, no bark. And so this system is basically designed so that you can look at a board and then you get so many cuts on that board to get it to that perfect condition. And so we'll go through an example here. Here's a nice big chunk of bur oak. And so let's back up a second, right? So there's other details here. It has to be so big, right? And then you have all these grades, and the grades basically are just based on the size of the cut you'll get and how many cuts you have to make to get there, right? So this is a 30-inch wide piece of wood. I think this is 10 feet long. Okay, so it makes all of our minimum board size requirements. And then it's got this crack and a bunch of decay, and then a bunch of cracks through here and more cracks, and then there's a bunch of weird reaction cracks and stuff. And but you kind of got these two nice sections. You'll get some really nice clean lumber out of here, and this whole half, for the most part, is really nice clear lumber. So if you look at our chart, how many cuts do we have to make to get clear lumber? All right, so we make one cut here. That's our first cut. One. We make another cut here, because this is all useless for the most part. 2 cuts, and we make a 3rd cut here. So we're at 3 cuts. Oop. So we're under the 4 for first and seconds and select. Now we got to look at the percentage, total yield percentage. So all the cuts we made isn't the super important factor exactly. You have to take those cuts and then say, well, how much wood did I actually get out of this thing? You know, you can make 2 cuts on a board that's 90% rotten, and oh, it fits into first and seconds. But that's not the case if you only get like 2 little 2x2s out of the thing. And so if we lose, we have half that's good, so we're at least 50% good. And then we lose 20% of the remaining half, so what does that be? 10% down, and we lose half of the rest of that. So now, you know, whatever that is, 20%. So we're total, we got to have like 70 or 80% of good wood still, right? Somewhere in there? I don't know. What do you think? Is this the good face or the bad face? That's the other thing there. So you look at the board, it has a top and a bottom. One of the will look better than the other, according to the specs. You usually grade based on the bottom. So if it's on the worst face and it makes first and seconds, then you're really in first and seconds. If it's on the good face and it barely is there, the bad face is worse, you might be able to get select. So there's the difference there. But the percentages are the same. Anyway, so I think we're actually at number 1 common because we're between 66 and 83%. So why is that important? Because at the mill later, whoever, or the processing place, the cabinet shop, whoever, this is time and labor for them to make all these cuts, and then they have a lot of waste. Now they have to deal with that waste, and you know, and so if the board requires basically no further processing, they make more product faster, less diddling around, less material to have to handle, and so that's a higher value board. Where if you have all the time in the world, you're a hobbyist or you just like stuffing, then you might be happy buying number 3s and just spending all day to get like 1 or 2 boards. If you want character wood for that rustic appeal, you might choose to buy number 3s, 2s or 3s, because they're going to have more defects and stuff to them. So, but they're all worth more or less to certain people. You know, cabinet makers want first and seconds. You know, folks paneling rustic lodges want number 2s and 3s. So, you know, adjust your price point accordingly. Let's look at some first and seconds, huh? Look at these. Pin oak and bur oak. Huh? Beautiful. Oh, this one does what do we got here? We got 1 cut, 2 cut, 50%, 25%, 75%. Number 1 common. All right, we're gonna go outside and do this all later, so y'all will get this full experience going through a massive stack of wood. There should be handouts. Murphy, do we get handouts? Yes, okay, great. The handouts have all this information on it, so you'll work as a team and we'll go and work together and grade some lumber. What about this one? Can we get anything out of here? Knots, cracks, bark coming in a long ways? Nope. You're not getting anything out of this piece of wood. But isn't it pretty? Worth more as a slab than as lumber. Oh, what about these? This is some bur oak. You're really not getting any lumber out of that, are you? But one heck of a tabletop. So depends on your market. Okay. Continuing along the standards. So we know how to kind of grade stuff now. Is it good? Is it bad? What's the end use? And but now you got to say, is it fresh off the saw? Which would be rough sawn. So most of our sample pieces here are rough sawn. And then, you know, is it air dried? So it was just sat outside and the air went out, you know, the air dried it out. It's going to crack and warp and move a little more. And then you can get it heat treated or kiln dried. And there's all these extra things that happen after you sawn the board that are super important in its value and use. So you don't just stop when you're done, when you cut it, you keep moving on. Then you get the grade stamp based on all that information. And you got lumber, actual lumber. Good job.